So is there any value in reading old IT books?
How many of us have old IT books?
I have loads of
We
old
have
loads
yeah.
of IT books.
I've got a stack. Some are mouldering and some are not.
Do you read them?
Well, the ones that are not, yes, I do read them. I read Jerry Weinberg's book, General Systems Thinking, quite regularly. I can't say I sit down and read all of it, but I read bits of it from time to time. That's one of my touchstones that I go to. So yes, I read an old IT book from time to time.
So I still buy old IT books.
Yeah, I buy the occasional one. Yeah.
How old?
I don't really look at how old. I just know
Alan
they're...
buys vintage.
Yeah,
So
I'm not talking about ones that you get. No.
Because old IT books could mean
Yeah.
what, last year, because we age so as an example, Glenford Myers
Yep.
wrote The Art of Software Testing.
Yeah.
Yep. So that's an old IT book, The Art of Software Testing. That's not his best book, and that's not the only book he wrote, but that's the only book we've ever read, right? Because that's the testing book. However, he wrote a book called Software Reliability, which is much, much better than The Art of Software Testing, and deals with how to build software in a way that it's testable, and you can test it in different ways of doing it. And he makes use. What I find interesting is he makes points about team dynamics that we have now in Agile. So a lot of the stuff that we rediscover is in these old IT books, but you might not notice it the first time you read it unless you're aware of what's currently happening. He wrote a book called Composite Structured Design, which is written at a point where people were trying to discover how to build software. So before we had rules like don't repeat yourself, solid, all that kind of stuff, they were still trying to figure out how should we compose systems? How should we modularize this? How should we do this? So something like Composite Structured Design is written at the same time as a lot of the Jordan early books, a lot of the DeMarco early books, where they're hashing out what does it mean to design a system in a way that's maintainable, modular, testable, even though testable doesn't mean what it did now. So I get a lot of value from those books in terms of they remind you that people had to hash this out, that they were arguing over not necessarily the right way to do it, just ways of doing it and seeing which ones work. And what we've done now is we've solidified these things into generic heuristics, like don't repeat yourself. And rather than any justification for how a system works, what are its communication links, where does the data come from, how does it flow, how do we understand how modular it is, how do we
So we don't
maintain
have
it.
a sense of alternatives. The old books give you that sense of alternatives. They say this is why.
Not just they give you a sense of it, they say, we have no idea how to do this. Here are a whole bunch of different alternatives that we are currently experimenting with. Right? And you look back at this from a historical perspective and go, wow, and they're talking about testability, even at the point where we just ignore those things now. So, plus I like the fact that the languages were a lot simpler then. So a lot of the code examples aren't as complex now. So there's not looking at hugely complicated patterns, it's just if this sub-module, sub-procedure, whatever else. And it's a lot easier to understand, and it shows you that you can get a lot of value just by simplifying things. So for me, a lot of the value is just getting back to simplifying things and being aware of the options.
Understanding the structures as they're built. I guess, are they still as filled with Bob has a pizza parlour style metaphors, or do they actually go to the code? It's one of the frustrations I had with new books is that I read the metaphor and then I get to doing the thing, and it's not like the metaphor, and if the languages are simpler, then maybe that's...
So
the
most of them
examples
are
better.
academic. So it's interesting that some of them are really extremely academic, and some of them are academic but they're aimed at students, and students at that point are not academic because they haven't got the academia and don't understand it. But there's not a lot of metaphors in there, and not a lot of really bad examples. They're really just trying to handle
They're
structure.
talking about systems as systems, not as in pizza parlours and customers. Yeah. All right. That sounds like a good reason to read old IT books.
Plus there's the huge nostalgia.
Yes, I picked out the book and I remember 2006. Yeah.
I mean, so some of my favourite ones, there's old books on compilers and interpreters. Because we don't seem to study compilers and interpreters, certainly not in testing anymore. But if you look at what is keyword-driven automated testing, that's writing an interpreter for the most basic language. So you're not even putting any loops in. There's no conditions. It's just a set of statements. That is a state of the art. That's like the worst interpreter you could possibly imagine. That'd be like page 1 on these books. Right? And it's so simple. But for us, that's state of the art. And if you go back to this, it just helps you understand that what we're doing very often is so basic and rudimentary and obvious that it's not really something to crow about.
Yeah, I think that's part of the value is the understanding, which is not necessarily in newer books. It's going back to the older books, reading where it came from, which helps your current understanding. Or helps me.
Yeah,
anyway.
and what's also interesting in those books is the stuff in those books came from somewhere else.
Yeah.
So that will then lead you back to books on set theory, or books on graph theory, and books on, I don't know, statistics.
Now, why we've all got Safari books online,
Yep.
right? You know, because we have. It's one of my key tools as a tester. You go out and buy these things. Now, I might search for them in SBO, because in SBO you can look and say, okay, well, this talks about this other book. Is this also in SBO? Yes, it is, and I can go backwards that way. I've not done that much, and I might be inspired to do that. Is that something that... Why do you buy the physical copies?
Because you can't get them.
They're not on.
If in order to hold them non-physical copies, they're pirated copies if someone has scanned them in. Mm-hmm. Because these things are out of print.
So not on SBO, yeah.
Yeah, they're out of print. They're just not there anymore.
Yes.
Art of Software Testing is in its 3rd edition, so it's in print.
Yeah.
But the 1st edition is out of print. The 1st edition is probably the better one, and used to go for like 70, 80 quid because it was out of print for so long.
Yeah, it's certainly something funny about the... Yeah, some books are ridiculous. Yes. Once you get used to them being basically free on Safari, then you go and you buy a real one, and you think, oh, I don't have 90 quid for that.